Hi, everybody. I'm Kristen, and this is Hillary. We're from Maine Access Points, and we're here today to talk to y'all about opioid overdose response and naloxone training. So could you get us started with just the basics around naloxone or Narcan and what it actually is?
Yeah, for sure. So naloxone is an opioid antagonist. And what that means is that it has a higher affinity. It likes the opioid brain receptor more than the opioid does. So let me back up. In an opioid overdose, the opioids attach to the brain receptor that's in charge of our breathing. So it will slow or stop our breathing. And so an opioid overdose is respiratory failure. Naloxone works because it likes that brain receptor more. So if someone's experiencing an overdose, the opioid's on their brain receptor, we give them Narcan. The Narcan bumps the opioid off, sits on the brain receptor, and blocks the opioid from reaching again. And then it allows someone's body to start responding again. It allows someone to start breathing again. It's really important to note that the opioids don't go away while the naloxone is blocking that brain receptor. So after the naloxone has worn off, there is risk that someone will go back into an overdose. And so that's why it's really important that we stick around with someone after they have, woken up from an overdose, that we don't leave them. A couple other real basics about Narcan. It's a prescription medication. We have rules and laws in Maine that allow us to distribute it across the state. It will only work in an opioid overdose, but it's not going to cause harm if someone is experiencing a different overdose, say on a benzodiazepine or a stimulant. I think that that's it. And now we can really kind of move into a conversation on the factors that put someone at a higher risk of experiencing an overdose. Kristen, do you mind talking about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, so we know, a huge piece is not a risk factor itself, but using alone. We know a lot of people use substances alone because of stigma and shame and not having safe places to use. So that can really elevate your risk if someone else doesn't know what you're doing. Fentanyl-based overdoses happen so quickly. We need to be able to be in touch with somebody else in case Narcan does need to be administered. Some other risk factors are mixing drugs. So, before fentanyl came on the scene around 6 or 7 years ago, mixing substances, respiratory depressants like benzodiazepines that Hillary mentioned, alcohol and opioids, that mix can really put us more at risk. So knowing the dosage of what we're using together is really, really important, and using a stronger substance first is also very important. Some other risk factors, tolerance levels. So it just takes 3 to 5 days for our tolerance to change. So if I get out of treatment, I get out of detox, I get out of jail, I go to my family's home where maybe I don't use substances at all, or I use the same way I usually do, that can really throw off my tolerance level. And if I go back to return to use the same amount I was using 3 to 5 days ago, it's a lot for my body to process. If I've overdosed once, I'm 9 times more likely to overdose again. And they're doing some research to figure that out, but it really is about those receptors in the brain and how our body can respond to the overdoses and safely process to the opioids and safely process them. We also know that just general health, so living with HIV, living with hepatitis C, maybe not being hydrated, not being able to sleep very well, food. Now we have COVID-19, which also is a respiratory virus. So all of these things around our general health can play into when we're using substances, and how we're using them might put us more at risk. So just to recap, the risk factors that we really want to take into consideration are an unpredictable drug supply. So we really want to test all our drugs, including stimulants, pills, anything that we're using, to make sure and see if there's fentanyl in it. Another risk factor is using alone, mixing substances of any sort. We want to do the stronger substance first. And then our general health and any previous overdoses are definitely risk factors for an opioid or fentanyl-based overdose.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. So at this point, we're going to show a short video that really goes over the steps in overdose response. At the end of that video, we will recap kind of what we've gone over and talk briefly about aftercare and support.
I'm going to do a verbal check on somebody in the bathroom to make sure they're safe.
Hey, Ho, you okay?
Hey.
Okay, cool. I'm going to come back in a minute and just check on you, make sure you're safe, all right?
Yeah, fine.
Okay, sorry to be annoying.
So around a minute's gone by. I'm gonna check and give another knock to get a verbal confirmation.
Hey, Hill. I'm coming in.
So I'm gonna come in and I find somebody here, rigid against the wall. I'm gonna yell to my coworker to call 911. Mike, call 911, overdose. I'm gonna come to the Narcan kit, which is here on our wall, and grab the kit out. And I'm immediately gonna administer a first dose of Narcan. Try to get some verbal stimulation and give a sternum rub with your door knocking knuckles here. Just rub up and down on the endocrine system. There's lots of nerve endings. See if you get a response. Hey, Hill, are you with me? Hill, I'm gonna give you some Narcan, okay? Hill, if you have something soft that you can put behind somebody's head, that's great. People in fentanyl overdoses are usually very rigid, so we're not gonna move them for the sake of making sure that they don't have any spinal injury or brain injury. Moving them around can cause that. We're gonna take 1 dose of Narcan out, the 4 milligram, and we're gonna put it into 1 nostril. And we're just gonna take our peace fingers, our thumb, and spray the mist into the nostril. And then we're gonna start rescue breathing right away. There's masks in the kits. We're gonna give 2 initial breaths. This is a barrier for you to just protect yourself from vomit, from anything that might be there. If you just don't wanna put your mouth in somebody else's mouth right now during COVID. And you're gonna place, if we can't open the jaw, make a little U or a C, try to open the jaw. Sometimes in fentanyl-based overdoses, people can be very rigid, so these muscles lock. If you can't do that, you can breathe through the nose. So we're gonna take the perforated part of the mask, put it right over her nostrils, cover the mouth, and give 2 initial rescue breaths. Really just your regular breaths into their nostrils. And then a breath for yourself. Inhale, exhale. And then we're just going to start to see if we can give another sternum rub. Hey, Hell, are you here? Maybe the Narcan has started to work. If not, we can check the jaw again, see if it opens. Now it's opening, the muscles start to relax. We can go back to best practice. Make a seal with your mouth over their mouth, plug up the nose really well, and then do a 1 breath every 5 seconds. So 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi. You can put your hand on someone's chest to see if the air is starting to rise and fall. No, we're gonna give another breath. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi. If there's about 4 sets of those, if there's no response or a minute to 2, we're gonna take another 2nd dose of Narcan. And if you can remember which nostril, great, do the opposite one and take your peace fingers, thumb again, spray up the nostril. It's gonna go into the membrane, up to those receptors. Hopefully we start to get a response. Hell, you there? There she is. There she is. Hi. You okay? Yeah. You weren't breathing, so I had to give you some Narcan. Yeah. Try not to move if you can, just for a second, just to catch your breath. You breathing okay? All right. I'm glad you're all right. I'm glad you're here. So let's talk about the recovery position. Why we put people in the recovery position. We want to make sure that we're always keeping people's airways clear in case they're at risk of aspiration from vomiting during an opioid or fentanyl-based overdose. People in overdose situations, we can find them in all sorts of different positions, and it's really important if we ever have to leave them to go get our phone, go get our Narcan, tell somebody else what's happening, that we get them on their side. This is also really good for if somebody's been drinking, intoxication, right? If we don't know what's going on, it's always best practice to get them on their side. If we have them in a situation like this, lying on the ground, and we find them, one way to do this is we can take their inside hand, put it under their head like a pillow, take their outside leg, their outside arm, and we're just gonna make hooks with our arms underneath and roll the person with us with gravity and press down on that front knee before you leave, just to make sure that they're not gonna roll onto their back and be on their back where they might be at risk of aspiration. So again, this is the recovery position. We wanna make sure once we've rolled the person over that that knee is down here sort of as an anchor to make sure that the person doesn't roll back onto their back. Their inside hand here is placed there. And then make sure also that their head is actually on the side, right? If we have the head kind of moved back, there is still some risk if she vomits that she would aspirate. So we just want to make sure if she's this way that we have an open airway. Also, people can be sitting up, rigid. We don't need to move them off of their seat in an overdose situation, but you can take them by their armpits and kind of fold them over. That way we're clearing the airway if somebody does need to vomit. And if someone's really rigid against the wall, we can sort of move them to the wall so that at least we tilt their head to the side and place their top of their skull on the wall so that they'll vomit down if that happens.
So now you've seen an opioid or fentanyl-based overdose response. The three big takeaways that we would like you to hold after watching the video is Narcan, call, and air. If you can do step 1 and step 2 at the same time and you have a co-responder, someone can call 911 as you saw in the video, and someone can administer the Narcan at the same time. But we just ask, we know it's a really scary situation, so best practice, do the best you can. But remembering Narcan, call 911 for backup and support so you know someone's coming, and start to administer rescue breaths, air, is really important for us just to keep in our minds. That will help us when we're responding as well. So Narcan, call, air. One thing that you didn't see in the video was the aftercare and support that often goes in following a rescue. We weren't able to show that. So Hillary, could you talk a little bit about what that looks like for people?
Yeah, so I think what's really important to remember is aftercare and support looks different for everybody. What we know is really important is that we want to stay with someone for 60 to 90 minutes after they've experienced an overdose, just to make sure they don't go into an overdose again. But then, what aftercare and support looks like depends on the individual. It also, what aftercare and support looks like for the person responding is also unique. And so, as a community, as harm reduction programs across the state of Maine, we know that it's really important to provide peer support, aftercare, and support to folks who both experience their own overdose and experience responding to someone else's. So please reach out to this network of care that exists in Maine. We really want to show up to you in these moments.
And in closing, we just really want to acknowledge that the people who use drugs and communities of people who use drugs and their loved ones are saving one another's lives every day. And we're so thankful for that. And that's just such community care in itself. So we appreciate you.